This is Dr. Justina Agnieszka Chevalier. This is the second part of exercise entitled Balancing Sexuality Activity. It is based on the pursuit of well-being, safety, and assurance of male capacity and perception of safety from chance calculation to pursue a given woman, empowerment of assumption of natural role of a dominating role to pursue an offspring of that woman, and a woman responding in sexual surrender, which is weakening muscle relaxation in trust when that capacity is lowered in pleasure and love for that man, that he will not harm, harass, and will not reject her. To note, this is for persons who have no prior history of violence or no prior history also of killings or rape, and if such was present, that was not and is not source of post-traumatic stress disorder in confusion to having person perceived as someone else, and then change of attitude towards harming whenever that someone else is recognized in that person, and vice versa. This is corroborated in first activity and also making that chart, and is treated by exposure of persons presenting same characteristics. Still mechanism of adaptation and calculation occurs, and that is before, ideally not present, and if present, I've explained a few times how to do so. The person enough time passed to resolve it, or the person actually has never had such, so there is no chance of hatred or harming, but based on pre-assumptions or fears and prior experiences, persons are unable to enter into that normal pursuit of a male and female entering surrender in being impressed in that male in a primal way in a given area, in alignment of physiological functions and sexual responses in function of such present in the other person, pursuit of sexual activity, and pursuing so because persons love one another so much that they want to have only with one another a child, and based on that a lifelong achievement and fidelity, because one another is source of greatest desire in love as opposed to all others, which then if together eliminates conversation in mind with others, or leaving sexual activity in mind as source someone else videos and or other activities when that is possible, and a person's both capacitated, and after that remedial activity in person it is less attractive to have anything else, big hobby, work, or other persons, because of how those persons actually prefer one another and prefer to have sex and love than other activities. And then when children appear, when those children start to have own emancipate and sense of being loved yet empowered to pursue own relationship based on that, that is source of continuation of that relationship, that is pleasurable and thrilling and exciting to proportion of pursuit of next child. And in absence of such, one and the other constitute to one another persons without capacity to have children in realization of wanting of children of such and such degree and love in infatuation and such degrees of maturity, knowing what components it takes and how it feels like in that drugless mind expansion. I explained that, which for children enables to not dream and live in mind other relationship nor risk separation. The dynamic is when those persons described in that prior video meet in that indicated place. Place should be secluded, not frequented by others, and remote. Phones stored in a car or cars, and that is first to know. Persons do not pursue intercourse or sexual activity as such. It is because it is not possible and pending dynamic in a restoration of balance. The person who always is dominating and who lacks trust that the other one loves and has sense of lost identity, trying to impersonate someone else or seeing self as reflection of the other and then taking pleasure caused by self to the other as sole source of sexual pleasure, is the one who is supposed to be lying down undressed, while the person who is always being pursued is to approach, to provide tender, gradual, romantic love that is an denoted as adult intimacy. Such dynamic is described in detail in some books. I will describe rules that I recommend. First, there is no lying, and there is no threatening or punishing for lack of response in numbness to touch or to sexual activity, while that is the goal, to pursue it. Not goal to have sex and intercourse, but goal to bond in intimacy and pursue arousal to determine when it is asynchronous, so the other is not source or not happening, and when that self actually is not aroused from such happening, the other person, and also when that is source of arousal and stopping and not happening, and the person, that one who is being approached, to hold, touch, following that who, what, and how dynamic, but in person instead of a picture. Now the person is to be actually adored and loved. So from who that person is, from head to toe, the person is to be loved, adored, complimented, kissed in if wanted, touched by fully dressed in neutral clothes, a opposite gender chosen partner from all lifelong partners in a lifelong reciprocity of such nature. And then that person is not supposed to actually undress, but if in that person arousal, sexual arousal occurs, or even orgasms, that is wanted, and the other person is supposed to seek of such and seek on delight from that, and adoration and sexual arousal, and not pursue any sort of rigid rules of any sorts, because that is not the point. The point is to realize that one is attractive and own body is source for the other of adoration and pleasure and wanted. And when now that sexual arousal occurs in that person that is held, stimulated, asked to speak, to perform music, if persons prefer, or by selves, for one dedicated as such. Also, give sample of I don't know, a dynamic together, such as play, holding hands, and sleeping together, all of that which is allowed, but that person who is actually the dominating part to cause association or merging of body and soul in that other person, and source of conversation being that other person's, source of erotic pleasure being body of that other person, as opposed to own or in another substitute of that person intent to mimic that one, or also source of videos or that kind of stuff that in search of similarities to that person. All of that as goal should result inferior in a reception of that person that is being in fact restored in own body as a source of identity and masculinity if the man, or femininity if a woman, as that man is being actually not pursued, not intended to seduce, not intended to make love to, and not encouraged to such, and also not intended to convince to anything, while when she does not pursue him, he does not do anything. But that is actually the opposite for once, sometimes, or for many times to come, hopefully, because that person reestablishes sense of masculinity in trust that the woman actually responds to this. And so there is strict rule: no lying to flatter about such sexual arousal, not fornicating as goal to evoke it in any way, because that is not the goal. The goal is when there is that intimacy, who, what, how, that it is in love and gradual intimacy occurring, coming and going, the same as spontaneous orgasms or erections, and it is allowed, non-ridiculed, not being surprised or laughed at, and it is done when there's an obstacle in gentle inquiry what is wrong and pursuit of an explanation what thought in mind caused it, emotion, and the corresponding to it response with search of non-accusatory resolution of own and that person's impediments to progressive to an orgasm synchronous sexual act. And that is done again by holding from head to toe, by pursuit of that other person dressed one, of stimulation and of a smooth, no intense arousal, self being source, as well as that intimacy, but in such assumption that when it occurs, it is wonderful and source of own arousal. Hopefully, that is the expected thing. When not light about it, not to worry, but one then reciprocates with why that is, and speaks about it to resolve it, and it is pursued until either an obstacle that is not possible to conquest, as opposed to that mind or sometimes lifelong lovemaking alone, or living in person with someone else and lovemaking in head with someone else, that person present. And that non-remediable obstacle is greater love for someone else, or greater desire for someone else, or greater derived from the two need to have children with someone else, for one or for the other, or resentment and mistrust that one or the other does not reciprocate in such. And so that is all. If there is another person, it is resolvable by change, because there is a limit, such as I don't love you quite as much, or you don't love me quite as much, I don't desire you quite as much, or you don't desire me quite as much. And then it has finite nature. Persons do not feel like having a child together, versus all the obstacles, source being one and the other, established together for one another, and no longer obstacles of the desire upon stimulation, even very slight one, the same as in mind vision of it, is easy, effortless, and visual stimuli for a man or for a woman, a vision of that arousal of that person touching also and performing that thing, is source of love for that person, and is strong desire for that person, and that is to relax slowly and to be allowed for one and for the other, slowly or fast, however it is that the dynamic takes place, until that is established, that arousal in orgasm in synchronicity is possible, and in a man as culmination it will end in a sudden surge of energy, and that energy is not to harm but to actually turn around that woman and pursue sexual act. And that takes time, when that person for a long time was unable to do so, for any reason, especially for confusion of identity, the ideation, dissociation disorders, and all of those disorders that are derived from intense concentration and mind is somewhere else. And so when that happens, he will know and she will know, because that will change to so-called fire tradition, that man will have intense resentment if stopped from pursuing her sexually, while she will feel that lack of such pursuit is somehow artificial or enforced, and will bring hatred or irritability with obstacles of such of any nature, in fact, around. Ideally, that act should be rescheduled naturally when people feel like it. In a woman, it culminates in progression to an orgasm, preferably occurring in there, that is without any obstacle in mind and body, and clear association of source being physical body and actions of that man, only that man. And when such is established, him source of surrender.